Here we go. Welcome everybody to the Contemporary Issues class. We have a special guest today. We are so pleased to have Representative Jason Crow with us. We thank you, Jason, for agreeing to talk with our little class today. With so many issues going on, and we have a lot of folks who are active in different political issues, and we appreciate your service so much. I'm Steve Baska, the leader of the class. I want to welcome new folks who are here also with us today. And I have a few announcements before I introduce Jason. First one, of course, is mute yourself, please. In the lower left corner of your screen, click on the mute button, uh, the icon in the lower left corner. I can do that if there's background noise, and I'll do my best to keep noise down to a minimum. Second thing is we are recording this today for future playback. So that's your public announcement there. And third, please be kind to our speaker and don't dominate if we get to questions in person here. Please don't jump in too much. Let other folks have a chance to get in and ask questions too. And with that, we are about ready. Also, our purpose here today is just to talk with Jason and let him give us information, not really to challenge him on issues and have any extended discussion. So I ask you to please be cognizant of that. With that, I will introduce Jason Crow, a former Army Ranger and lawyer who represents Colorado's 6th District, which encompasses part of the north part of Denver, like Broomfield, and then all of Aurora, where Jason lives, and some areas south here, like Littleton and Centennial, where a lot of our folks are from also. Jason is a active, very active representative who works to strengthen our democracy and fight the influence of money in politics through ethics and campaign reform. He served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and upon returning home, Jason struggled to help veterans benefits. So he went to work helping veterans across Colorado. He was named as Denver's Pro Bono Lawyer of the Year for his work helping service members transition from military to civilian life. And Jason and his wife Desiree, I hope I'm pronouncing her name
Yeah,
correctly,
you got it,
Jason.
Steve. Yep.
Dr. Desiree Anderson Crow teaches and researches environmental policy and community resilience at the University of Colorado. They have 2 kids who love the outdoors, and Jason was just telling us he's been going to Little League games the last few days. He's back here in Colorado. So with that, Jason, we collected questions to ask. Ron Puning is going to ask those. Ron is a retired engineer and a Democratic activist for gun control and other issues in our state. And so I want to let Ron do that. And so everybody that's on the call, please allow us to have Ron ask questions of Jason first, and then when we get to a certain point, we'll go live and let you ask some follow-up questions also. So with that, Ron, please start your questions.
Okay, little background. I'm in HD 38, and
Okay.
I am a Democratic PCP precinct committee person, and I work quite a bit to help David Ortiz, Jason Crow, and of course Chris Kolker. And I had the privilege of helping you in your 2018 campaign, where you first defeated the incumbent Mike Kaufman. And I remember coming in the office to turn in some canvassing material one day, and you ran into me in the hall and said, "How's it going?" And I said, "It looks darn good." Because I could tell by knocking doors and talking that you get a real feel for how things are going.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, some of the things I liked about you is the fact that intelligent, committed, and open, and not locked into an ideology with such firmness that you won't consider different viewpoints and aspects. So with that, I'll start with a question or two. The House, of course, passed the H.R. 1 bill to try to limit voter suppression. It's been passed over to the Senate. You, of course, can't know what everything's going on in the Senate, but do you think there's any chance of some pieces of H.R. 1 limiting voter suppression and opening up the voting rights can get through the Senate?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. Well, thanks for all. Let me just start by thanking you and Steve and St. Andrews United Methodist for putting this together and giving me the opportunity to come and talk. This is actually my favorite thing to do, as many of you know, is talk with groups, and I obviously much prefer to do it in person. But we are all doing what we need to do to keep ourselves safe and follow the guidelines. So we appreciate that. But it is good. It is great to be with all of you. And Ron, you should tell me where you and Steve shop, because I need to get one of those shirts.
Just
It looks good.
coincidence.
It looks
That was
good.
just coincidence.
Well, on my screen, you guys are right above and below each other. So like,
Yeah.
you blend right in. No, I appreciate it. And especially your work in HD 38. I mean, that was, it took several tries for all of us to finally make through, but we did. The short answer is yes, I do believe there's always a chance of getting things through. I say that as somebody, I'm actually an optimist. I'm somebody who tends by nature to be an optimist. And frankly, I wouldn't be doing this job if I didn't think that there was a prospect for success. I mean, I have better things to do than just knock my head against a brick wall, you know, and just do things for the sake of doing them. So I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think it was possible to break through. But I say that not being naive either, right? I'm not naive to the extreme challenges, the polarization, the vitriol, the partisanship that's gripping our nation. So, you know, I've long said, and many of you have heard me say this, that campaign finance reform and what I like to call systematic democracy reform are the essential things to getting everything else done, right? I've sometimes been asked if I could just do one thing and then my congressional career, my career in public office would be over, what would it be? The answer is undoubtedly H.R. 1, because you know, if your issue is the climate crisis, if it's immigration reform, if it's healthcare reform, if it's racial justice, all of those things are tied to the systematic barriers and not getting done because of the influence of gerrymandering in our politics, the influence of big money, ethics issues, and voter suppression, the lack of access to the franchise, and all of which are addressed by H.R. 1. So if we got that done, so many other things would fall into place. It's tough in the Senate, right? We know that. We know we now repeatedly passed H.R. 1 in the House. It has gone, it used to be, you know, Mitch McConnell's graveyard, and actually turns out it's still Mitch McConnell's graveyard because of the filibuster, to be honest with you. So that's why I've come out in favor of ending the filibuster, because, I took my time thinking about that. I didn't jump at that, by the way. That was an evolution for me because I'm somebody that, you know, understands that there are some checks and controls in place. But when now arcane Senate procedure is holding up all progress, all of it, and thwarting the will of the people, and especially on issues that we are out of time on addressing, we just can't continue to go on that way. And I actually reached out to a bunch of senators when I was formulating my position on the filibuster. And I remember one in particular said, you know, Jason, I've been in the Senate for decades, and I have never once seen the filibuster used to achieve a bipartisan result. It's only been used to thwart the will of the people and to prevent progress. So that's why I've come out and said that the filibuster has to be ended. You know, some people are talking about reform, and if we can get that done, then it's possible that we can get things like H.R. 1 or components of H.R. 1, including voting rights, because of course we're seeing these state level voting rights disenfranchisement laws that are going to be extremely dangerous going into the next election cycle. Sorry, that was a long answer, but it's a complicated issue. So as you all know.
Okay. Another question we had from class member Jim Vandemiller. Jim, we of course saw what happened under the Trump administration. There was literally a demolishment of the EPA. I've never seen an administration tear into environmental protection like this last one did. But now there's hope. There's a better EPA administrator. And certainly having Joe Biden as president gives us encouragement. But looking at what the House can do, what do you see that the House can do to try to advance stopping climate change or thwarting it, trying to slow it down?
Yeah. Well, first of all, this past week I signed on as an original co-sponsor of a bill called the Thrive Act, which actually was first put together by my good friend Deb Haaland last Congress. And Deb is obviously exactly where she needs to be now as the Secretary of the Interior and the first Native American woman to lead that agency and doing amazing work. But I've now joined with Ed Markey and Debbie Dingle and other members of my colleague to propose the Thrive Act, because the climate crisis is existential, right? We are out of time. The science is very clear. The data is very clear. We're already seeing it. This is not a future crisis. It's a crisis that's on us now with increased wildfires, heat, extreme weather, hurricanes, pandemic, right? We're looking at pandemics, and we know that pandemics will increase. So this is already here, and it's going to get worse and worse. So we either have to make the investments now, or we're going to be making them later, just rebuilding and repairing and trying to survive. I would much rather, I'm not somebody who likes wasting money. So that's why I say make the investments now, because it's smarter. They're smaller investments than trying to protect our planet and society a decade from now as it falls apart. So that's the bold. Those are the big bold things, right? But there's also things that we have to do now, recognizing that we don't have the votes for that currently in the Senate. Because I also often say, one of my sayings is, most baseball games are won by singles and doubles. Everybody likes the grand slam, but most games are won by grinding it out, right? So we got to be pushing for the big and bold things, no doubt about it. But we also have to be pursuing those singles and doubles. And it comes in the form of doing things like actually having a competent EPA. Funding it appropriately, having a good administrator in it. The Trump administration not only cut funding or tried to starve it of funding, but they also didn't appoint people in these agencies, right? They didn't want government to work. So one of the ways that they did that is they just didn't fill positions, right? And a lot of these functions left unfilled and unperformed. So the Trump or the Biden administration is now fixing that. We also have to do things like address the methane issues, right? Because even if we cut carbon emissions, if we don't address the methane that comes from these uncapped wells and other things, methane actually is the most dangerous greenhouse gas. Has an impact 10 to 20 times higher than most carbon emissions. So we have to address that capping issue of methane, which is extremely important. We have to, and we're going to have to allocate money to do that, because some of these wells they don't have companies. Companies have gone defunct and bankrupt, essentially. They don't exist anymore. So there is a government function in trying to stem those wells. The other issue is infrastructure, right? The cost of clean energy is going way, way down, right? And actually the market is handling a lot of this itself, because the costs of producing fossil fuel or coal-fired power plants is extremely high now. It costs a lot to run and maintain these old power plants, and it's now cheaper to get wind and solar. The problem is twofold. One is we don't have the infrastructure, the transmission infrastructure, because we don't have a unified national grid. We have a disparate, disconnected, rural electrification system. We have all these separate grids that don't tie into each other, so we can't move the energy from where the sun is blowing or the sun is shining, wind is blowing to where it's not. So we have to connect it. And that's a big part of the American jobs plan that Biden proposes, to make the investments in infrastructure to connect it. And then we can move that energy around in a sophisticated, engineered way, and also create millions of American labor jobs in the process, by the way, and put millions of Americans to work. And then the second is storage. We actually don't have the technology right now to store the energy. That's just a fact. So we could not flip a switch and go to total renewable energy because we don't have the storage technology and capability. So we have to be making investments in research and development, science and technology to develop that large scale storage to have a baseline power. So we have to do both of those things at the same time.
Okay. Another question was, will the provisions in the American Jobs Plan and the American Families Act fit under Senate reconciliation rules? I think the person is asking, can some of the things that Joe Biden has proposed get through the Senate without getting blocked by the filibuster?
Yeah, so the answer is yes. Technically speaking, the answer is yes, right? We have actually the Senate parliamentarian issued a ruling saying that we can essentially use reconciliation 2 more times this year. And, you know, it's my view that things like the American Jobs Plan have to get done. Now, I would much rather do things in a bipartisan way. That's my strong preference because that would, you know, build additional support for it. It would show that government can work. It would build a broader coalition. And historically, things that get done with bipartisan support are more enduring. Right, so that we just don't have this pendulum swing that then the next part, you know, next time the party gets in power, then they just undo something. Those things that you can get past with bipartisan support tend not to have that pendulum swing effect as much. So that's my preference. But if Republicans are just going to lock up and just say no, and they just don't want this administration to succeed, then we can't sit around and let the country, you know, flail and not let important things get done. We still have to get them done. And the reconciliation would be the tool to do that. So we've got to in good faith go and you have those negotiations, and that would include compromise, by the way, right? We have a proposal. Let's see their proposal. Let's see if we can meet somewhere in the middle where people are happy with, and you know, not everybody's going to be happy, of course. That's just the nature of the beast in this business. You know, people are always going to be upset on both sides of the aisle. But if we can get enough folks together, then I think we can have an enduring solution, but also rebuild trust in government. Because that's the other thing that we have to do, is not just pass these important substantive laws and policies and spending bills, but we also have to rebuild trust in government, because apathy and distrust is actually driving this populism and this disenchantment that is just fueling vitriol. So we have to do both of those as well. So long way of saying, I hope you guys don't mind my long answers, but I like to kind of flesh these things out a little bit. Long way of saying, yes, we have it available. I think there's a lot of interim steps before we decide whether or not we invoke that option and just get done what we have to get done. But let's bear in mind that we also have folks like Joe Manchin and others who have said that they would be extremely reluctant to use reconciliation. So we have to make sure we're bringing him into the fold and negotiating with him as well.
Okay. I was out in front of the Arvada gun store protesting last Saturday with some Colorado ceasefire members. And one of the people in the class, Todd Allen, asked, what can everyday citizens do to try to help advance gun control and actually make the legislature responsive? I think we're seeing good things at the Colorado state level, for sure. But what do you see on the federal level? What are you hopeful about, and what advancements might be able to be done at the federal level?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. So you all know this is one of my biggest issues, right? And I, since day one, and I actually took this on in 2017 when I was running, when everybody told me not to. Everyone's like, don't take this on, like, leave it alone in a district like this. I'm like, no, like, you know, my wife and I sat down and said, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it in a way that, you know, keeps faith with our own personal interests and views, and we're just going to do what we think is right. And then, you know, we hope that people will see that we're doing something, even if there's risk to it. So we did, you know, we led on that and pushed on it, and people responded favorably for it, because I think we're at a point where people are with us on that issue, right? I mean, that's what the data show, is that over 90% of Americans are for common sense gun violence prevention legislation, including the majority of Republicans, because they know it works, right? We know in Colorado it's worked, and we've had we've had mass shootings since then. We've had gun violence since then, because we should never buy this straw man argument that it's going to fix everything, right? Because people on the other side say, "Oh, look, there was a shooting, and you guys have gun laws in place." Well, nobody has says that it fixes everything, but what we say is that good policy can make a huge difference. Just like the fact that cars now have seat belts mandatory and airbags and are better designed and have brake lights, right? We still have car accidents, but we have significantly fewer fatal car accidents and injuries than we had 50 years ago. So that's kind of what this is about. So you all also know that I come at this issue a little bit differently from some folks, right? I come at this issue from somebody that has been a lifelong gun owner and hunter. I actually started hunting when I was 12, growing up, deer and duck and rabbit, and I've been a gun owner for many decades. Became an Army Ranger, obviously used guns for my work professionally and had them used against me at war. But I'm also a citizen. I'm a father. I'm an elected representative. And I learned a couple of decades ago in service that citizenship has rights, but the corollary of rights are responsibilities, right? And duties. And that's the way you don't talk enough about, right? People want to talk about the rights, but they don't want to talk about the duties and responsibilities of citizenship and the duties that we have to one another. So that's how I try to approach this issue. And that, we have almost 40,000 Americans a year dying because of guns, and that's suicides, that's accidents, that's shootings, etc. And we're failing because we're not even doing the most basic things, like universal background checks, banning assault weapons, which have no purpose of being in our communities, magazine limitations, extreme risk protection orders, and other things. Last thing I'll say on that is, well, two things, and I'll answer your question about what you can do too. So we know it works in Colorado, right? Because there's also this argument you hear a lot that if you pass laws, then only outlaws will have guns. It's a favorite of the gun lobby, right? Well, that's just actually not true, right? Since we passed universal background checks in 2013, 2014, after the Aurora Theater shooting, according to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, which tracks these statistics, over 2,700 people who lawfully cannot have a gun because they're a convicted felon, domestic abuser, or a danger to themselves or others, have tried to buy a gun and have been stopped from buying a gun. 2,700 in the last 8 years. Nobody's ever going to tell me that doesn't make us safer and that hasn't saved lives, right? It makes no sense. So the facts bear that out. And I also say, guess what? No law-abiding responsible gun owner has lost their gun, right? This parade of horribles that people say hasn't happened either. It won't happen. So there's common sense things to do. And the last piece is this, and this actually applies outside the issue of guns. This applies to most things that are kind of polarizing or difficult policy issues. And that is, we have to force ourselves to have conversations outside of our circle, right? Outside of our comfort zone. Right? We're just kind of talking to each other. People that agree with each other kind of talk to each other. Right? We have these echo chambers that have developed on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, within our little enclaves, wherever we happen to live. And we're just talking to people we agree with all the time. And that's easy, right? I mean, just sitting around and talking with people who agree with you is easy and it's comfortable. I understand that. I do that too. Sometimes when I get tired, like it's nice just to hang out and talk to people who agree with you and talk about how crazy it is. But that's not how change is made, right? And that's not how you build a coalition. So the hard work ahead of all of us is that we have to force ourselves to have honest but respectful, candid conversations with people that start in a non-judgmental way, right? You don't start it by arguing. You don't start it by coming out, guns blazing. No, didn't mean, no pun intended there, but you don't start it by being aggressively debating. You just talk about shared values, talk about things you have in common, things that you might have some common ground on, and then kind of go from there.
Okay. All right, another question. One of the older members of our class, Jim Watson, who I believe is 94, uh, put forth, and Jim, by the way, served in World War II. He was on one of the, was it Saipan or not Iwo Jima? Yeah, I think he was on Saipan, or yeah, one of the islands where the U.S. forces actually occupied. And his question was, the government's allowing a deduction for the cost of moving your business overseas as a deduction on income tax. So he says, we've got some income tax rules that allow businesses and maybe even encourage businesses to get a deduction for moving jobs abroad. Jim feels very strongly that Congress should act to try to curb that, not encourage businesses to move overseas. Thoughts on that? And do you see any legislation possibly coming back in that area?
Yeah, well, Jim, thank you for your service, first off. And I know a lot of people say that, but I say that from one veteran to another, understanding. Well, I'll just leave it at that. Thank you. Yeah, so I agree. I mean, there shouldn't be loopholes like that. There's a couple of things that we talk about. Oops, sorry. There's a couple of things we talk about when talking about taxation. One is the loopholes like that for offshoring that need to be closed, because if you're taking advantage of the U.S. business environment, of the predictable regulatory environment, of the economy that we have, which is a desirable economy and place to do business for a variety of reasons, and it's not just because of taxation. By the way, when people talk about taxation as the predominant issue driver behind business, it's not just the only driver behind business. Workforce matters, livability matters, quality of life matters, predictability matters. People want to come and do business in the United States because we have a transparent and regulated business environment where there are rules of the road that everybody follows, and there is less intellectual property theft, and there's access to courts and things like that you don't have around the world. So there's many things that go into what makes for a competitive place to do business that we have to also talk about. Roads and bridges, infrastructure matters, and that's crumbling too. So long way of saying we have to close those loopholes, number one, that allow offshoring. Number two, there are businesses like Amazon and others that pay no corporate taxes, right? They take advantage. They have all these tax lawyers that take advantage of loopholes and ways of structuring their business and ways of placing their business, and they don't pay anything. That's got to end. It just does. They're just not paying. It's not even that they're not paying their fair share. They're just not paying, right? And yet they're benefiting from the investments that me and you are making, right? We're paying our taxes. We're building the roads and the bridges and all the services that these companies are using to make tons of money. That's not fair, and it has to end. And then, President Biden has made very clear that the investments that we have to make in families and childcare and infrastructure and technology to make our economy and our country competitive in the 21st century are going to be paid for by closing those loopholes. We can fund the IRS better so that they can actually enforce the laws. There's a lot of revenue that we're leaving on the table because they don't actually have the ability to enforce some of these business loopholes and go after the bad actors and people that are abusing the system. And then increases on taxes of those making over $400,000 a year, which is about 1 or 2% of the country. The vast majority of people are not earning anywhere near that. So that's how I think we right scale this for the future.
Okay. Are there measures right now in front of the House that you're more excited about and personally more interested in? We've covered a bunch of them today, but anything that jumps out as something you're really fired up about?
My bills, Ron. So, no. Before I get into my bills, I'll give HR 1. We already talked about that. HR 8, universal background checks. There's also a bill called Protecting Our Democracy Act that was put together by Adam Schiff after his experience and Congress's experience at the last administration. Because what we discovered is that a lot of the things that we include in the bucket of democracy, rule of law, good governance are actually just norms and traditions of our democracy, that they're not laws, right? They're not codified, that they're just things that every administration, Republican or Democrat, has followed because that's how a democracy works. So when you have an administration that just decides to throw all that out the window, disregard congressional subpoenas to thwart the rule of law, then we didn't have the recourse that we need. So the Protecting Our Democracy Act actually codifies many of those things. It actually protects whistleblowers, protects inspector generals from being fired by the president, requires disclosure of presidential taxes, puts teeth behind congressional subpoenas and enforcement power, so that we better can balance our branches of government, because what we've also seen is the executive branch has become very, very powerful. And by the way, that happened before Trump. That has been a trend a long time in the making, that more and more power has been given to the executive branch by Congress over many decades. And our balance between the branches of government is out of whack right now. So I'm one who believes very strongly that Congress needs to reassert itself, that it needs to take back some of those powers. Like, we've given away a lot of immigration powers, by the way, the Immigration and Naturalization Act that we should take back. We've given away many of our war powers over the last 20 years since 9/11. And it's time for us to end many of these AUMFs, these authorizations for use of military force, and take back our war powers. And there are other examples of it. So protecting our democracy is one way that we would start that process, and I'm excited about that. My own bills, I've got a couple of bills that I'm extremely excited about. Number one, Michael Bennet and I introduced a bill a couple of weeks ago that he's actually worked on in prior Congresses, called the Outdoor Restoration Partnership Act. And it would be a $60 billion investment in our public lands to do wildfire mitigation, to restore our watersheds, to invest in all the deferred maintenance, because we have these public lands that have had deferred maintenance for a very long time. And with the climate crisis, what we're seeing is our forests are degrading. They're getting far less healthier, and forest fires are increasing, and the costs are exorbitant, in the tens of billions of dollars a year for burned down homes and lost economic activity. And our watersheds are degrading too, which of course is also tied to fire. So those of you who are water people, and I had a background in water for a couple of years, when your forests degrade after a forest fire, then you get degradation of the watershed as well. So the water in the Front Range actually comes from about 150 miles away up in the mountains. And the quality of that water, because of acid mine drainage, because of degradation of the watershed, is getting worse and worse. So it'll be the point that, because we have both quality issues and quantity issues in Colorado. So we have to make those investments to make sure we're protecting our lands, our watersheds, and mitigating fire damage. So I'm excited about that bill. And it's actually bipartisan. So I was able to get Mike Simpson from Idaho to join us in that effort, which was not an easy lift, by the way, talking to him many, many times, but was able to get that done. Excitingly enough, that bill actually made it into the American Jobs Plan. So it was one of only a handful of bills that was specifically called out by name by the president in his American Jobs Plan. So Michael and I are very excited about that. The next one goes to investment in entrepreneurship in underserved areas. So many of you know I sit on the Small Business Committee. I'm actually the only member of Congress in Colorado on the Small Business Committee. And I'm the chairman of the Innovation, Workforce Development, and Entrepreneurship Subcommittee. So I've gone around the community a lot in some of our more underserved areas, and I've talked to them, what do we need to do to catalyze business investment and growth and economic development in these areas? And one of the things they say over and over again is, it's nice to have outside help. We have these opportunity zones and other kind of outside investment mechanisms where outside businesses can come in and invest in neighborhoods. But what they say is we want to help ourselves, right? It's good to have outside investment and businesses coming in, but we have entrepreneurs, good businesses, good people in our community that just need a leg up. So we put together a bill, and it's bipartisan and bicameral. It's Chris Coons and Tim Scott in the Senate, and it's me and Troy Balderson in the House. And we put a bill together that we've called the Next Generation Entrepreneurship Core Act. And what it's going to do is create a fellowship program around the country where we choose at least 320 fellows in underserved communities every year. And they get a living stipend, they get healthcare expenses paid for, they get better access to capital, they get mentorship by a committee of retired executives that will help mentor them as business owners, and special attention by small business development centers and other issues to really help catalyze these businesses within communities. Because what we learn is when investment comes from within the community, when the business is owned by somebody that lives within the community that the business serves, that investment stays in the community. And it actually creates a lot more economic development and a lot more jobs than outside investment usually does. So I'm extremely excited about the Next Generation Entrepreneurship Core Act as well. And there are many, many others, but I'll stop there.
Okay. All right. A couple folks are curious about, with the new census, we've got another congressional seat. And I know most of the growth in Colorado has occurred along the Front Range. Do you have any ideas of how your 6th district might change, or is it pure guesswork? It might move south a little bit. You've got a piece of Highlands Ranch.
Yeah.
You won Highlands Ranch by about 200 votes.
290 votes. Don't cut me short, Ron.
But you think it'll...
We barely squeaked by, but became the only Democrat in history to do it. So I'll take it.
Yeah. Any speculation, or is it anybody's call how they'll redraw?
Yeah, it really is anybody's call. I mean, we actually did the right thing in 2018. We did what every state should do, and actually we did what is called for in HR 1, and that is take politics out of the process. It's actually the right thing, and it's just another example of Colorado leading on something. You know, we lead on automatic voter registration and enhancing access to the franchise, and we're leading on this too. But we're also going through it for the first time. So I think everybody's sitting at the edge of their seats wondering, like, how is the commission going to work? And are the laws and regulations we put in place to implement the amendment? How's that going to work? So I'm kind of sitting on the sidelines like all of you, looking at that process play out. And we all have our own kind of machinations of what might happen. And you're right, the vast majority of the population growth has been along the Front Range. Although you have to look at relative growth. Where has some of the growth been higher than in other places? And there are other places in the north than it has been in the south. So the short answer is I don't know. We're going to add a district, which means all the districts have to shrink by 70 to 80,000 constituents, and then we're going to have to move too. So if the district goes in the north, then that means we get pushed probably further to the south and pick up more of Douglas County, but we very well could move further east and north too. So there's a lot of different ways that can go, and I'm sitting there watching the process play out like all of you.
Okay. A touchy question. Has the House censured any of the members that may have encouraged or even semi-participated in the January 6th events?
Well, there was the censure of Marjorie Taylor Greene, which happened, I think that maybe that was back in March timeframe, February or March. And that was, not directly tied to January 6th. It was, more tied to some of her rhetoric, post that. But of course, her terrible comments continue and just kind of all blend together for me. So she was removed from her committees, as a matter of fact, not just censured, but removed from her committee assignments. The downside of that is she now has a lot of extra time on her hands, which she has been using to call roll call votes on every vote and waste all of our time. So where normally there are these heavily bipartisan, universally supported measures like naming post offices or passing technical fixes to business laws or doing other things that everybody agrees on. Normally those would be done by unanimous consent, voice vote, or blocked into what's called en bloc votes. She's just sitting there on the floor calling roll call votes. So we all have to go in and take 45 minutes and go vote and waste our time. So that's kind of what she's doing, just trying to be difficult about it. More generally, since January 6th, my personal take is that we have to let the independent processes play out, right? There are investigations going on at numerous levels. There's DOJ investigations going on that are being conducted of individuals, regardless of title or position that they hold. So it doesn't matter whether a member of Congress, whether you're the president's lawyer, for example, or anybody else for that matter. They're looking at everything. You know, as members of Congress and as somebody that believes in rule of law and process, I'm obviously not going to get involved in that. I'm going to let it play out, and then we'll see where the facts lead you. And then, you know, we'll take action based on the results. There are IG investigations that are going on too, inspector generals at DOJ and DOD. Then the third is the GAO investigation that's actually pending. So I'm actually leading that in the House, or leading it as in I called for it. So I actually led a letter request of about 100 members of Congress that initiated the Government Accountability Office investigation, because the way the GAO investigations are kicked off is they can either be requested by a committee or a member of Congress. So I was the one that requested it for the House. Michael Bennet requested it for the Senate. So that process started back in February, and they're going through the scoping. They're scoping it, designing the methodology of the investigation right now. They're almost at the end of that process, and then they're going to start the substantive interviews and surveys and document review over the next couple of months, and then we'll expect rolling results here through the summer and fall. But that will be the most comprehensive assessment of what happened leading up to and on January 6th that we will have had. So I'll be paying close attention to that.
Okay.
Ron and Jason, we've got about 15 minutes left. Ron, why don't we let other folks get in,
Yes.
if that's okay with you? And let me just do a quick question too, with my class leader prerogative. Ask about immigration too, Jason. Of course, immigration's a continuing serious problem. Are we ever going to be able to find a solution to that that'll be satisfying and help America and people coming from other countries here?
Yeah. Well, we need to, right? I mean, this goes back to me being an optimist, but also a realist, and recognizing how tough it is, and also somebody who represents, a district with a lot of immigrants and refugees. Nearly 20% of our district were born outside of the country. It's one of the most diverse districts in the nation. We have over 160 languages spoken in our community. And for me, that's a source of strength. It's a source of beauty. We are a more vibrant community. A lot of those immigrants and refugees are entrepreneurs and business owners, actually. People come to the US and they start their own businesses, and we actually are a more resilient, stronger, and better economy as a result of that. So their contributions are really important. I will say, just from an economic standpoint, and then I'll talk about the moral standpoint, which is actually the most important one, but economists are very, very clear that our future prosperity as a country is going to be tied to our ability to bring talent in from overseas to help grow our economy and spur innovation and entrepreneurship. That's just a fact, right? We can't continue to grow as an economy and have the prosperity that we need to have unless we have a more predictable, equitable, and accessible immigration system. And you think about the immigration debate, and let me kind of flesh this out a little bit, because people say immigration reform, but there's a lot of really critical components of that. There's the visa component, right, which is actually the one that we hear the most about in our community, because many of the people that we talked about, come from all over the world. They come from Africa, Middle East, Asia, Central, South America. Many of those folks have come here on visas using the diversity visa program, or H1 Bs or Js or other visas. So expanding those programs, making them more predictable, raising the caps are going to be really important to make sure that people within our community can reunite their families and build their businesses and do other things. So that's an important component. There's the immigration detention system. And of course, you all know I've taken on oversight of that in a very robust way. I'm leading the push in Congress to end the private detention system, because I think that inserting a profit motivation into detention, whether it's immigration or others, creates perverse results. It just always will. So we should remove those profit motivations from that system and in those facilities. I passed my POD Act, as many of you know, in 2019 after GEO refused to let me in to their center for over a month. And I tried 3 times to get in, they wouldn't let me. Then I said, well, I'm going to pass a law that will force you to let me in. And I did. And it's the Public Oversight of Detention Centers Act, which passed at the end of 2019, which now is federal law, and it requires every detention center, whether private or not, that's run by CBP, HHS, or ICE, to allow members of Congress and their staff, immediate access to those facilities. And that's made a big difference, I think, being able to have access and transparency. Then, of course, there's the issue of immigration from Central America and South America and the border issues, because a lot of people will talk about the border issues, which are extremely important. We have to go to the root causes, right? Why do people make that journey to begin with from the Northern Triangle, from Central America? Because of the dissolution, the corruption, the economic issues that we're seeing there. So going to the root cause is really important, and making sure that we have a humane system when people do make that journey, because the vast majority of them are actually applying for asylum under U.S. law. I think we have to be really clear about that most of the people that are sitting in GEO and Aurora are asylum seekers. And they actually, when people say, oh, they came here illegally, well, what asylum law says is that if you present yourself for asylum at the border, at a border patrol point, that's what the law says. So they're actually requesting asylum in the way that our law specifies. So there's different aspects of this. I think we have to be really clear about what we're talking about. But yeah, reform in all of those categories, from the visa system to root causes in Central and South America, to border, to the detention center system, to, of course, our dreamers and TPS holders who just need to be granted permanent residency and path to citizenship. And that, of course, is one of the more moral issues of our time, that if we can't grant a path to citizenship for kids who are just as American as all of us sitting here right here and know nothing but this country, then we have a real problem as a country. And we have to get that done.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Okay, let's get a couple of other folks in here. If you've got a question, raise your hand or go ahead and just unmute and ask your question. Gene Dawson, go ahead.
Yes, Jason Crow, thank you so much. Speaking from Heather Gardens, where you have visited and where you have strong support, as you know. Back to this matter of bipartisanship having more staying power. Has there ever been any recent discussion about having a White House conference on gun violence? The reason I ask that, when they had a White House conference on children, we had then the Children's Bureau that came in to creation, the Civil Rights White House Conference, certainly then the Civil Rights Act, the Older Americans Conference, which we would have every decade, produced the Older Americans Act, Medicare as a good example. Viewing the complexities of gun violence and the hold it seems to have in our country, has there been any discussion about having such a conference on this very perplexing issue of gun violence?
Yeah, thanks, Eugene. And do you go by Eugene or Gene?
Gene.
Gene, yeah, thank you. I haven't been a part of any discussions about a White House conference, but I like the idea. Actually, I'm gonna take it and I'll propose it. I think it's important that we keep the conversation going, keep it within the public consciousness, and try to bring people together. Actually, maybe who I'll propose it to is the new nominee. If he gets through, and I think you should, David Chipman, who the president nominated to run the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. And he's a longtime friend of mine. He's been working for the Giffords organizations for many years, and I've known him for a long time. And he's fantastic. Career law enforcement officer, understands the complexity of these issues. So next time I talk to David, I'll talk to him about that. Appreciate the idea.
Thank you.
Steve, this is Rob Polite. I'm from Highlands Ranch. I have a question. Police reform is in the news all over the place, and the Aurora Police Department are under investigation for their actions. Where do you see police reform happening at the federal level?
Yeah, thanks. Well, we passed the Justice and Policing Act in the House again, like we did last Congress. In addition to that, I have a bill with Sheila Jackson Lee called the George Floyd Law Enforcement Trust and Integrity Act, which would actually implement 7 of the recommendations from Barack Obama's 21st Century Task Force on Policing. They're very, very common sense things like establishing accountability standards and changing the model of recruitment. Because one of the things that I think one of the best things we can do, in my view, and talking to people in the community, is we need to do a better job of who we're recruiting into departments, right? To change the culture of policing, right? And what so often happens around the country is you have police departments that are actually manned by people that don't live in the communities that they're policing, and hence don't look like the communities they're policing, and that creates a trust problem from the outset. So that raises the question of how do we recruit and retain officers from the communities they serve, which won't solve everything, because you need to still have accountability standards, you need to have transparency, oversight, and enforcement of rules. But it will matter a lot who is in uniform in these departments. So my bill actually would create a pilot program and fund a pilot program to have departments create new programs to recruit from and within the communities they serve, which I'm pretty excited about. And this is kind of a longer term solution, but one that I think could make a big difference. So that's been one area of focus. I've been working on another bill over the last couple of months that is a result of, or it actually looked at, and it would implement several of the recommendations out of the internal review board process after the killing of Elijah McClain. There was an IRB review of that that looked at the manner in which departments police themselves, right? The internal affairs investigations that happen after police killings or police violence. And across the board, so many departments actually do those reviews themselves. And of course, it's no surprise, and in any organization, if your organization polices itself, you're not going to get as honest of an assessment. So my bill would require outside review, an independent review of these incidents to address the accountability aspect, not just the front end kind of recruiting and staffing aspect. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. And there are some bipartisan discussions, is my understanding, in the Senate that involve Tim Scott, who's kind of been anointed as the Republican Senate lead on police reform issues, and some Democrats as well. So I'm keeping a close eye on those discussions, and there actually are on the immigration front as well. There's a group of people that are talking about immigration issues. So I'll be very anxious to see what come out of some of those Senate discussions.
Hey, anybody else? Go ahead.
Yes, I have a question. What do you see as the role for the United States going forward now that we've decided to pull out of Afghanistan? Obviously, there will be consequences. And do you see a proper role to try to deal with those consequences?
Yeah, Susan, that's so tough, right? And that's one that I have spent many years thinking about and dealing with. First off, my heart is still in so many ways. There's a part of my heart that is in Afghanistan, like Iraq. All of us who have served there and fought there, leave certain parts of ourselves there, and that will remain true, I suspect, for the rest of my life. So an issue I've kind of taken on, and not just for personal reasons, but also for committee reasons. And I'm on the Armed Services Committee, as you all know. So I take very seriously my responsibility. My number one responsibility on the Armed Services Committee is to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of our troops. That's how I view that role, is make sure that they're being protected and taken care of, and that we're honoring their service. So that's my primary responsibility. But I also now sit on the House Intelligence Committee. I was appointed to that committee last month, so I'm on intelligence as well. So I've been spending a fair amount of time the last couple of months looking at this issue, being briefed on it. It's tough. There are no good options. There are just bad options left. If there was a military solution to this, we would have found it a long time ago. We're 20 years in. I ultimately agree with the president's decision although it's a decision that's not without substantial risk. We have to be very honest. There's a lot of risk here, but there's also risk to doing nothing and staying. Right, that's the other thing I'm pointing out. There's risks to doing something, and there's risks to doing nothing. And the risk to doing nothing, as we've seen, is that there's risk everywhere in the world. Right, there's risk in Asia with regard to China. There's risk with Russia. There's risk in Central and South America. We're dealing with a border surge, as we do almost every time this year. It's perennial. So the question is not whether or not there's risk, it's relative risk. And we have to apply limited resources to the risks that we perceive, and look at where can we use those limited resources to meet the greatest risks. So I think it is time that we draw down our combat forces. So given that, because of those that risk assessment and trade-off, and generals will always say, if you just listen to the generals, they always say, give me 10,000 more troops, give me another year, right? That's what generals say, right? I mean, and I don't blame them for it, but like to a general, things can always be solved militarily. But that's why we have civilian control of the military, because we know that sometimes they can't, and there are trade-offs to it. So it was a tough decision. So now, where do we go from here? Number one, I'm going to be doing oversight and pushing hard to make sure that we're doing this in the right way, because what are called retrograde operations, what the military calls retrograde, it's the technical term for withdrawal, are the most dangerous things that the military can do. Because as you draw down forces, and there are fewer and fewer at these forward operating bases, at these outposts, the people remaining are more and more vulnerable. Nobody wants to be the last person out, right? So making sure we're doing that the right way is extremely important to me. Number two, protecting our Afghan partners. We've had thousands of Afghans who have worked as contractors, interpreters, translators, and others who have done so at great risk, and we have an obligation to them, a moral one and a national security one. So pushing hard for the SIV program, or to evacuate those individuals from Afghanistan, because they will be killed by the Taliban if we don't. And then three, doing so in close coordination with our NATO allies, because let's not forget that the NATO alliance, which is over 75 years old now, the only time in the history of the NATO alliance that Article 5 of the alliance, which is the mutual self-defense obligation, the one that says an attack on one is an attack on all, and they'll all come and assist. The only time that Article 5 has been invoked is after 9/11, when our NATO partners went to Afghanistan with us, and they actually have more combat troops there than we do, by a large margin, actually. So we can't pull out unless we do so in close collaboration and coordination with them, because we have an obligation to do right by them, because they did right by us. So those are some of the things I'm looking closely at.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. We are about out of time. It's 11:31. Jason, we want to thank you so much for taking an hour with us today. And thank you, Ron, for inviting Jason today. Ron, do you have any final question or comments?
Thank you, and proud to have a person of great capability as my congressman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason, for your service in Congress and abroad. We are very grateful.
Thank you. Well, thanks for the opportunity. I actually enjoyed this tremendously. I don't get to wonk out like this all the time, but having a long form, kind of very intense policy discussion is a special treat for me. Actually, I actually really enjoy it. So
Good.
Thanks for bearing with my long answers, but I enjoyed it.
Thank your wife as well for her contribution.
I will. I will thank her.
Yes.
Thank you,
Thank
All right. Thanks
Jason
all.
you
and
so
Joelle.
much,
Everyone, be
Jason.
well.
It was excellent.
Thanks a
Great.
lot. Take
Thank
care.
you all. Hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.